Recording in progress. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to our final episode. I can't believe we have landed here. I've been really looking forward to this conversation since we started our process almost 2 years ago, just because I love debriefs, just in general. So I'm really excited to dive into this conversation. As always, and forever, I am joined by my amazing co-host, Jesse Del Fierro.
That's right. Forever, y'all. You heard it here.
You can't tear us apart even if you try.
Not that you would want to.
No.
You monsters. I'm sorry. I'm kidding. Kidding.
And we're here to have our final conversation, a wrap up about the lab and itself. Jesse, do you want to start us off by just kind of like giving us a little summary recap of how we got to where we're at from our last episode?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much to my ever gorgeous, fabulous, bestest co-host on this earth, Andrés Moreno. What a great introduction. Absolutely. Process. It has been a process. Let's start there. I don't think either of us, I don't think all four of us, JD and Adrienne included, really anticipated where this program is going to take us. And at this point, we've had our 6 online sessions. We've had our debrief with JD, Derbyshire, and Adrienne, Wong, an episode that hopefully you've listened to prior to this, but that's okay if you haven't. And we've had our 2 in-person celebration to our false ending and the start of the launch of this podcast. So if you're listening to this, thank you so much if you got to be there in person in either Edmonton or Calgary. And if you couldn't, thanks so much for being with us now.
Thanks, Jesse. I want to start with gratitude towards a lot of the people who have been involved in this process, because it's been a lot of people and a big chunk of our community that has supported us in many different ways, who have been participants, who have been guest instructors, the Theatre Alberta staff who helped us with the original funding of this and who helped us along the way, to our amazing mentors, JD and Adrienne, and just across the board, gratitude, because this is an experiment that I think we've learned a lot from, and we couldn't have gotten to where we got if we weren't given the opportunity to try something like this for our community, knowing full well it could fail. And so I'm very excited for us to jump into our final conversation, because a lot has happened, and not only has a lot been happening within the lab, but we've seen a lot happen within our community. And it's an interesting thing to track a whole process and a whole community for a year and a bit. I don't think we can say a full year and a half, a year and a bit. And just seeing how things evolve through time, and especially while adding the layer of a late stage pandemic into the whole mix. How are you feeling about this conversation, Jesse?
Gratitude, always gratitude. We're grateful for our successes, and we're grateful for our failures. And that's something I can confidently share with you all. I mean, what better to start this conversation just to talk about some of the things that we wish we could have done differently, because failure is a part of every process. And the start of this process, we really valued the ability to share and communicate with kindness and generosity how we can keep ourselves accountable. And so shout out to baby us a year and a half ago, who our intentions were
not baby us.
the youths of our time. Our intentions and inspirations to why we started this engagement lab, truly thinking back to it now, was to build relationship in community. We saw there was a gap in the folks our communities were engaging with, and a core value of mine always is, in order to take care of the vulnerable, we must take care of those most vulnerable within the margins. And that was the start of this conversation for me. Do I feel like we've succeeded in that? TBD. I mean, relationship building is always ongoing. This process is ongoing. But I can say that we've started this conversation. I can say that we've connected and have initiated relationships with folks who we may have not connected with otherwise, and with folks across Alberta, which is pretty incredible. Do I think we needed more time and more focus and energy into building specific relationships? Yeah, but we're young. We're part of this community. We have time. I believe that. If you want to hang out, let us know. Emails are in the bio.
We'll go for ice cream and talk about equity.
Vegan ice cream if you're lactose intolerant, like me.
I'm glad you brought up failure because I do think it's a big part of the process. And I think it was something that we had to, at least for myself, I guess I can't speak for both of us, but for me, I had to very much come to terms with being okay with failure in this process. Because at first I was like, no, it's got to be perfect. If we're offering this for our community and we've got all these funds and people behind it, it's got to be perfect. And we did our best, but we also could have never created a perfect program for each participant of the 40 that we picked.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think it's funny. It's like now I feel like I'm ready. If we were to go back to the beginning, I'd be like, I know exactly how we could do this differently. And I think that was the intention, right? Was to like begin a scientific method of how can we build these things into our industry, but also how can we build community capacity and how can we make spaces and connections that will allow lessons to be shared so folks can work together in making changes in our industry. So, I mean, I don't know, right? Failures, successes, they're just words. We didn't do exactly what we set out to do, but we did a thing and there was beauty that came from it. There was challenges that came from it and there were lessons that came from it. So whether we succeeded or failed, we did the thing. And I feel really excited about, um, personally the growth that I now have from having done the thing and how I can take that into any kind of leadership roles that I get moving on from here. I'm really excited about that. And I'm really happy to be coming out of this feeling like I'm less scared of failure because it's bound to happen when you're trying something new that has never been done.
And failure is a lot less scary when you have community and support backing you up, when you have trust and built channels of communication, knowing that should anything go quote unquote wrong, there'll be people there to let you know. They're not, you know, drowning in all the uncertainty that this work can bring. Something I'll always come back to is this work is hard, but it doesn't have to be painful. We're
Mm.
finding joy, we're finding curiosity.
And we're finding a way to do the soaring, like you said from the book, right? From Emergent Strategy. It's about soaring and just letting the wind hold you up as opposed to eternally flapping because you fear that if you just stop for a second, you're going to fall. Sometimes this work is going to take time. And sometimes even something that you don't even think or might not be in your sights as an intention will happen that will be like, hey, that's wonderful. Like something I want to highlight in this process. And I think I would call it like one of my like golden nuggets from the lab that I want to carry with me is a friendship that develops between two specific members of our group where they now meet once a month to have coffee and talk to each other and connect. And I mean, for a while, they also talked about what was going on in the lab and their thoughts around it. And that happened completely outside of the lab, completely without any kind of nudging from the lab itself. It just happened. And I think it's just a beautiful example of how even though you might not get exactly what you intended or what you set out to do at the beginning, there's still some beauty that's going to come if you just stick to your intentions, stick to your beliefs, and do the best that you can, at least as an administrator. That's my thought. So yeah, that's one of the like golden nuggets of the lab where I'm like, hey, something really great came out of this lab. And I love that. Jesse, do you have any other nuggets that you're holding on to or that you want to share with us?
I mean, honestly, truthfully, I don't know if I say this enough. You can tell us in the comments that I'm just so incredibly grateful to get to work with you throughout this entire process. Because if we're going to talk about feelings, this was hard. Neither of us have done anything to this scale. And so the learning curve was massive. And through it all, I always trusted that Andreas had me in their care. And that's like, I don't know, what more could I ever ask for in a program that's about building relationships?
Oh, I'm feeling emotional.
I know. I'm not emotional. I'm not crying.
No, I want to jump in and also echo that, because I think above everything, I'm so glad that we were able to do this together and that it wasn't something that was spearheaded by one person. Because oftentimes we're still stuck in this mindset that leadership has to be a one person job. But when you allow two people to work on something together, when you allow a community, a group to decide on how to work best, that's how you can get a better, more well-rounded product. And I don't think that the engagement lab would have been half of what it was if I didn't have you to bounce ideas off of, to have conversations about moving forward, to share the load, to share the emotions, to cry over Zoom sometimes, or to hide under a table.
Oh, no.
I'm glad that throughout this process, I have been able to find somebody that I really do consider such a close collaborator and just like a friend. And somebody who just was able to, like, as much as I held space for you, you held space for me. And knowing that we were both like, I'm going to need support. So you support me and I support you. We're doing the same job, but I don't have to feel like I'm the only one supporting myself.
And truly, genuinely, the book that Andreas is mentioning, Emergent Strategy, which we've followed along through this program, shout out to Adrienne Marie Brown, we found our unique purpose in this program. There were things that I was very good at, and there are things that Andreas were really good at. And there wasn't ever a competition or a need to know everything. It was just, I trust that you're very good at this. You do this. And I'm confident that I can do this on the other hand. And part of some of the sessions we've discussed was finding a way to go from engagement to shared leadership. The idea that one of our intentions was to create a lab in which we can plant seeds for 40 leaders in our community, and discovering throughout the process that 40 leaders means 40 leaders in shared leadership, and genuinely understanding that community isn't just about what you can give back to community. It's about how this community is sharing the work.
And how it continues. Because, we're talking about how it's the end of the engagement lab. It's our final episode. But realistically, that just means that this process is done. Whereas the work continues, and hopefully the lessons ripple, and hopefully things happen outside, because maybe two people just got to have a small conversation during the engagement. And so when we talk about it ending, it's not that like the work is done. It's like, yeah, we did it. We solved things. No, by any means, we're actually farther from solving things. But I think in my own process, now I get to go debrief, disseminate what I've learned, and then follow new curiosities that came out of this process, and follow new endeavors that tackle questions that specifically came out of this process. So I think that that's also a really exciting place to be, where with our work with Theatre Alberta and just in our own personal journeys, like we can really start to take a look at how we continue to do this work. And for my sake, like continue to do this work in shared leadership that is sustainable. Those are the two things that now I'm like, okay, if we start, it's kind of like, I recently have also had the pleasure to just learn a little bit more about accessible and audio described performances for theater. But one of the biggest things that I learned and takeaways that I learned from that was how, instead of like, how do we just like add accessibility measures at the end? How do we just have ASL interpreters off into a corner and just call that accessible? How do we start with the lens of accessibility from day one of rehearsal to be able to create a more inclusive, accessible, and also immersive experience for this. I've got a lot of goals I want to do. I'm an Aries. I just want to do everything. But it's like, how do I now start from day one thinking about, oh, I want to do this? And this is how I could do it in shared leadership in a sustainable manner and have that permeate the whole process.
And that includes getting funding for that. That includes making time for that. It's part of the foundation of the process you're going into, not just, as you were saying, put at the end
Mm-hmm.
and then labeling it accessible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm really thankful for the journey, honestly. JD and Adrienne mentioned this beautiful metaphor of them being the people around the trampoline and us being the people jumping in the trampoline. But I'm really thankful for being able to have had the process. I think I've grown a lot as a person, and I've had a lot of things that didn't go well, things that became lessons that hurt in the moment, but that I think made me feel more equipped to continue this work in this community, because I am interested in seeing where we can take it if we all work together. And no longer being like, this is a company that's doing this, but it's like, this is a community that's doing this work together.
Oof,
Right?
fire. And all of this to say we're grateful. And we're still going through the process of accountability. We're still reflecting. We had our debrief and we're reflecting on the actions that we've taken, the decisions we've made, and the impact and the consequences of all of those choices. And now we're in the process of following through, of being like, this is what we've done, and this is what we've learned, what we've hoped to learn, how we're processing, and this is how we want to move forward.
Mhm. And I'm excited to see where we go next. I really do think that like this journey has shaped us into different humans and better leaders. I'm just gonna say it. I'm sorry, people. I'm just gonna say it. I think we're better leaders after this process. It sounds braggy, but here we are. But no, overall, I genuinely, I think being able to go through this was a challenge, and I'm glad we went through it together. I want to ask one last final question. And please, if you have more things to bring up, please do. But the last question I have for you is like, do you have any advice for anybody who would be interested in starting something like this in their community?
Take the time you need. Do not let granting bodies, do not let companies, do not let individuals rush you into the process. This is a lifelong journey. If you're going to start something, start with the long game in mind, and start sustainably. Start somewhere because it's going to be a learning process no matter what. And this work isn't new. We've been doing this work for years, and it's built a momentum over the past few years because of the pandemic, because of Black Lives Matter, because of anti-Asian hate, because of the world that we're in. And we can learn from each other. So my biggest advice is you're not alone, so don't do this alone. And take your time because it's a lifelong process. How about you?
Yeah, I think you've touched on it a little bit, but the biggest piece of advice I'd give anyone is this is not new work. This is not something that is just starting. And so reach out to your community. If you don't know where to start, you can ask somebody who might know where to start. And just ask the questions and talk to the people who've been doing this work. And I'm making it like a blanket statement here. I could be completely wrong, but in my experience, 9 times out of 10, when we reach out to people who have been doing this work, they are more than happy to have a conversation with you and to share with you what they've learned, and to sometimes even offer you advice on what you're wanting to do. Because like Jesse said, this is an ongoing process, a lifelong curiosity. And there are people who have been doing it who can help you out so that you don't have to necessarily learn the same lessons by making the same mistakes. but you can take their lessons from their mistakes, make mistakes that are your own that add to that lesson. And that's how we move forward, is by adding and recognizing that we're standing on the shoulders of the people who came before us, who've done this work before us to get us to where we are now. And now we get to take that baton and continue forward using what they've learned. So yeah, if there was anything I wish I could change in this process, it would have been to just maybe have more conversations with people who were doing this work before we started this journey. Because I think that would have been super helpful. And then we would have been able to start with that sense of knowing that we were a part of a community that's been doing this before. So it wouldn't have felt so lonely at times. And it's funny to say lonely when there's two of us, but there was a loneliness that we both shared.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's things things I wish I could do differently, like revamp the financial structure so that folks were coming not out of obligation. I would have spoken to more people in the community and learn more about what's going on in the community. Because a part of what we started with was the idea that we would learn along the way. And I think that's a beautiful process. And I think that's exactly what we did. And I think how I would do it differently is that we would learn along the way with folks on a similar journey as us. And then later on the road, we could connect again and share what we've witnessed and what we've learned.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the payment structures, the money structures that we built around this, because our original idea for paying folks was so that this wasn't work that was being done on people's time without any kind of compensation, or that they wouldn't have to worry so much about having to take the hours that we wanted from them, because at least they were being paid. But it did create an interesting reaction. And again, right, it's that thing of like, so in the experiment, the question of money is one question that is now a bigger question of like, how do you do this job equitably with the intention of wanting to pay people for their time without it becoming an obligation or a contractual job? Because that inherently also changes the conversations that are being had in the room and the way people are coming in to view those conversations. So I'm thankful you brought it up, because that's also something I would be interested to see how you can build something where people get paid for their time, but that it doesn't feel like they are doing it for the money. I am, if nothing, just so thankful that I get to have all these questions at the end of this process. Jesse, any final thoughts or anything else you want to bring up about this process?
Take care of yourselves, y'all. Continue exploring what self-reflection and accountability and sustainability and care is for yourself, because that will inevitably translate into how you engage with community. And continue building trust. Continue exploring different channels of communication with folks you've just met, with folks you've been in conversation with for years.
Yeah, I would just say also thank you for following this journey, whoever you have out there who's been following this journey. We hope that us sharing this has at least given you some insights, some thoughts. But if you're ever curious and want to reach out, you can always reach out at us through Theatre Alberta. Our emails are there, and we're more than happy to have conversations if you have questions about the Engagement Lab, or if you are starting something in your own community and have questions about finding support or finding community or getting in contact with people. This is a lifelong path for us as well. And if I was going to leave anyone with any final thoughts, it would be to believe in yourself, that sometimes this work feels like it's scary to start, and that you might not necessarily be the person who should be starting this work. But I'd say believe in yourself, find your community, and know that even if you fail, at least you have started something, and it only continues.
And if you're looking for your people, if you're looking for community, totally feel free to reach out. We know some really good people.
We know some really awesome people.
And we would love to connect you with them.
Of course. Thank you again. I know you're going to hear it in the little blurb at the end, but thank you to all our sponsors. Thank you to Theatre Alberta for supporting us in this journey, and to Carrie Mitchell for your guidance as well.
Thank you to all of our guests, Amy Thompson, Evan Salja, to JD Derbyshire, Adrienne Wong, to Shima Robinson, to Cole Elvis, to Heidi Taylor, to Makar Mayash. Thanks to all of our participants who this wouldn't have been possible without your engagement.
To Daryl Kudney and to Kyle Standing Ready Snow for their workshop and amazing insights during our original Banff in person back in 2021. To you, Jesse, thank you.
To you, Andrés, thank you.
And we hope that this conversation goes on beyond this and that you know that your community is a lot closer than you think. Thank you for following us. And this has been the Engagement Labcast. Goodbye.
Peace.
The Engagement Lab podcast is possible with the initial support from 3 local foundations to transition our all-in program to the 3550 initiative and the Engagement Lab. The foundations were the Edmonton Community Foundation, Calgary Foundation, and the Rozsa Foundation.
We're thrilled to announce that the Engagement Lab is supported by both Alberta Culture's Community Initiatives Program and the Canada Council for the Arts. Theatre Alberta is grateful to our operating funders, the Alberta Foundation for the Arts, the Edmonton Arts Council, and Calgary Arts Development. Thank you so much for tuning in.
And we'll see you next time at the Engagement Lab podcast.